"Get out of my warehouse, you old dinosaur," the regional director sneered. I looked at the overloaded racks, handed him my safety badge, and smiled. In exactly 72 hours, my family land trust would lock the gates, reclaiming every square inch of the ground beneath his feet. That was the moment everything broke. But to understand why a 34-year-old regional director thought he could throw me out of a 300,000 square foot logistics hub, you have to go back 20 years. You have to look at the concrete and the steel and the dirt beneath it. My name is Victor Ward. I am 52 years old, and for 2 decades, I have been the Senior Safety Director at Vanguard Logistics Group's Savannah Distribution Center. This facility is the crown jewel of their southeastern network, pushing $45 million in annual recurring revenue. It is a massive, cavernous complex. 48 loading docks, 24-hour shift rotations, and a constant, deafening hum of electric forklifts and automated conveyor systems. On any given day, we have $25 million worth of high-value inventory sitting in these bays, from industrial machinery parts to pallets of volatile lithium-ion battery packs waiting for port clearance, to the suits at the corporate headquarters in Chicago. I was just a line item on the payroll, an older guy in a high-vis vest who walked the floor with a clipboard and a digital decibel meter. They saw safety as a cost center, a slow brake pedal on their high-speed shipping machine. But they forgot one crucial detail. They did not own the land they built their empire on. Back in 2006, Vanguard was a mid-sized carrier desperate for a foothold near the port of Savannah. My father, Thomas Ward, owned 80 acres of prime commercial land right off Interstate 95. He did not want to sell. He believed in long-term cash flow. So, with the help of our trust attorney, Walter Kelly, my father signed a 20-year land lease with Vanguard. I was 32 at the time, a young safety engineer. Part of the negotiation was that Vanguard would hire me to oversee the construction safety and run the facility's compliance program. I knew every foot of that concrete slab because I watched it pour. The lease was set to expire in late 2026. We were in the middle of quiet negotiations for a 10-year renewal when the corporate office decided to shake things up. They sent us Bradley Cross. Bradley was 34, sharp-suited and entirely devoid of warehouse floor experience. He was a numbers guy, the product of corporate spreadsheets and aggressive KPI targets. He arrived in Savannah with a mandate to increase shipping throughput by 40%. The rumor on the warehouse floor was that Bradley had a quarterly bonus of $250,000 tied directly to this performance metric. From day one, Bradley and I did not get along. He looked at me and saw a relic. He hated the fact that I had the authority to lock down a shipping lane if I detected a hazard. "We are running a logistics company, Victor, not a daycare," Bradley told me during our first weekly manager meeting. He sat at the head of the conference table, tapping his expensive pen against an iPad. "Every minute a forklift sits idle because of your safety audits, we lose money. I want these trucks loaded and I want them moving." "We move cargo, Bradley, but we do it without crushing people," I replied, keeping my voice level. "This facility operates under OSHA regulations and EPA hazmat guidelines. We don't cut corners on load limits or emergency egress." Bradley just smiled, a thin, condescending smirk that made my collar feel tight. "Regulations are guidelines, Victor. We optimize. That is what I do. I optimize." His version of optimization started within 3 weeks. He cut the maintenance budget for our forklift fleet by 20%, forcing the mechanics to delay scheduled brake overhauls. Then, he targeted the storage racking. The warehouse had recently installed a high-density, automated racking system designed to hold heavy industrial pallets. Each bay had a certified load limit of 10,000 pounds. I was walking the floor on a hot Tuesday morning when I noticed the overhead steel beams in Zone C. They were sagging. I pulled out my digital caliper and measured the deflection. It was well outside the safety tolerance. I walked over to the floor supervisor, Dale Higgins. "Dale, what's stacked in Zone C?" I asked, pointing up at the high racks. Dale looked uneasy. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Bradley had us put the heavy transmission castings up there, Victor. He wanted to clear the staging floor for the lithium battery shipment coming from the port. Those castings weigh 14,000 pounds per pallet," I said. Those racks are rated for 10,000. We are 40% over the limit. Look at the support pins. They are shearing. I told him, Dale muttered, looking around to make sure Bradley wasn't nearby. He told me to shut up and load them anyway. Said if we don't clear the floor, the trucks will back up to the highway and he'll find a supervisor who can handle the pressure. I didn't argue with Dale. It wasn't his fault. I walked back to my office, printed out a formal rack hazard notice, and walked straight into Bradley's office. I laid the paperwork on his glass desk. Zone C is compromised, I said. We need to unload those transmission castings immediately. The racking system is at risk of structural failure. If one of those bays collapses, it will trigger a domino effect that will take down the entire eastern grid of the warehouse. Bradley didn't even look at the paper. Those castings are scheduled to ship next Thursday. Moving them now will cost us 50 man-hours and delay 3 regional delivery trucks. We don't have the time. It's not about time, Bradley. It's about structural integrity, I said. If OSHA walks in here and sees those deflections, they will shut down the entire facility. Not to mention the physical danger to the operators. OSHA isn't coming, Victor, Bradley said, finally looking up. His eyes were cold. I run this region. You report to me. I suggest you go back to your office, file that report in your cabinet, and let my crew do their jobs. I'm not filing this away, I said. I am logging it in the Federal Compliance Database this afternoon as a critical hazard. And I will not sign off on the monthly safety compliance log until Zone C is cleared. Bradley stood up, leaning over his desk. If you don't sign that log, our corporate compliance audit fails. That means my throughput numbers don't get certified, and my operation is flagged. I am telling you, sign the log. No, I said, not until the racks are safe. Bradley's face flushed red. He took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and sat back down. We're done here, Victor. I walked out of his office, knowing the line had been drawn. What Bradley didn't know was that my refusal was not just a minor annoyance. It was the first domino in a chain reaction that would cost his company millions. The next morning, the situation escalated from a safety disagreement to a full-blown crisis. At 6 a.m., 6 heavy container trailers arrived at the shipping dock. They were carrying 300 pallets of high-capacity lithium-ion battery packs, destined for a regional electric vehicle assembly plant. This was a critical cargo, worth over $12 million on its own, and the manufacturer had strict penalty clauses for any delivery delays. The staging floor of the warehouse was already congested. Because of the overloaded racks in Zone C that I had flagged, we had lost several storage bays. The floor supervisor, Dale Higgins, was trying to find space for the incoming pallets. I was conducting my morning walkthrough, checking the emergency egress paths, when I saw the first 10 pallets of batteries being dropped directly in front of the double-door fire exit in Zone B. This exit led straight to the outside muster point. It was a primary egress route for over 50 floor workers. I walked over to the forklift operator who was just about to stack a second tier of battery crates. "Stop the lift," I said, raising my hand. "You can't stack those here. You're blocking the fire exit." The operator shut off the engine, looking frustrated. "Victor, Bradley told us to put them here. The staging area is full and the docks are backed up. If we don't unload these trailers, the carrier is going to charge us detention fees." "I don't care about detention fees," I said. "This is a Class 1 fire hazard. Lithium-ion batteries are subject to thermal runaway. If a fire starts in this zone and this exit is blocked, people will die. Egress paths must remain completely unobstructed under OSHA Standard 1910-37. Move these pallets back to the dock staging lane." "Move nothing." A voice barked from behind me. It was Bradley Cross. He was walking fast down the main aisle, flanked by Chelsea Finch, the local human resources coordinator. Bradley's face was tense, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his tailored trousers. "What is the delay here, Victor?" Bradley demanded, stopping a foot away from me. "I told the dock crew to clear those trailers 2 hours ago. Why is this lift sitting idle?" "They are blocking the primary emergency exit with combustible hazardous materials, Bradley," I said, pointing to the yellow-striped egress zone on the floor. "This is a direct violation of federal safety standards and our own internal emergency action plan. I have halted work in Zone B until these pallets are relocated to a compliant storage area." Bradley laughed, a dry, humorless sound. We don't have a compliant storage area because you locked down Zone C yesterday. You are choking my facility, Victor. You are actively sabotaging our shipping schedule. I am doing my job, I said. If we have a thermal event in these battery cells, and the workers in this zone cannot escape through these doors, Vanguard will face criminal negligence charges. I will not authorize work under these conditions. Bradley turned to Chelsea Finch, the HR coordinator, then looked back at me. I gave you a direct order yesterday to sign the safety logs and clear Zone C. You refused. Today, you are interfering with active logistics operations. You are costing this company thousands of dollars every hour. My duty is to the safety of this crew, not your end-of-year bonus, Bradley, I said. That was the breaking point. Bradley's eyes went dark and he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You think you're untouchable because you've been here for 20 years? You think you own this place? You're a safety inspector, Victor. You are easily replaced. He turned to the forklift operator. Get back to work. Load the pallets. Do not move that lift, I warned the operator. The worker looked between the two of us, terrified, and kept his hands off the controls. Bradley snapped. He looked at Chelsea and said, "Write it up," insulting a superior officer, refusing a direct operational order, and causing unauthorized work stoppage. We are terminating him for cause effective immediately. Chelsea looked surprised, shifting her weight. Bradley, shouldn't we go through the progressive discipline steps? Victor has a clean record for 20 years. I don't care about his record, Bradley snarled. He is actively disrupting operations. That is a terminable offense under Section 4 of the Employee Handbook. I want him off the property now. He turned back to me, a look of triumph on his face. Give me your security badge, Victor. You are fired. Pack your personal belongings and leave. If you are still here in 10 minutes, I will have security escort you out for trespassing. I looked at Bradley. I didn't yell. I didn't get angry. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. For 20 years, I had watched this company grow, and I had protected the people who worked here. Bradley was a temporary parasite, a man who would ruin lives for a quarterly payout. Understood, I said quietly. I unclipped my proximity badge from my belt loop and laid it on the hood of the forklift. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my personal keys, and took off my safety vest. Victor. Dale Higgins started, his voice quiet. It's fine. Dale, I said, giving him a small nod. Just stay safe. I walked back to my office, Bradley and Chelsea following me like prison guards. I didn't have much to pack. I took my personal certification files, my EPA Hazmat Administrator license certificate from the wall, and my father's old copper tape measure. I placed them into a simple cardboard box. As I walked out of the main lobby, the heavy glass doors clicking shut behind me, I could hear Bradley already shouting instructions to the dock supervisors, telling them to double-stack the battery pallets. I walked to my truck in the gravel parking lot. The sun was hot, beating down on the long line of freight trucks waiting on the access road. I sat in the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out my phone. I didn't call OSHA first. I called Walter Kelly, our family trust attorney. Walter, I said when he picked up, Bradley Cross just fired me. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Did he do it in writing, Victor? He did it on the floor, in front of the HR coordinator and the staff. They are writing up the formal termination for cause right now. I could hear the rustle of papers on Walter's desk. And are they still running the lithium battery shipment? They are stacking them in front of the Zone B fire exits as we speak, I said. And the high-density racks in Zone C are still overloaded by 40%. Excellent, Walter said, his voice calm and precise. Come to my office, Victor. We need to print out the land lease agreement. It is time to pull the plug. Walter Kelly's office was located in a restored brick building in downtown Savannah, far away from the diesel fumes and grinding gears of the industrial park. When I walked in, Walter was already sitting at his conference table, surrounded by thick binder folders. He had the original 2006 land lease agreement spread out across the polished wood. Sit down, Victor, Walter said, adjusting his glasses. I've been reading. Through your father's lease agreement, Thomas was a smart man when he insisted on these terms 20 years ago. He knew that logistics companies would try to treat the land like a disposable asset. I took a seat opposite him, placing my cardboard box of personal files on the floor. Bradley thinks he has total control because the company spends millions of dollars on this facility. He doesn't understand how leases work. Most corporate managers don't. Walter agreed, pulling out a highlighted page from the lease document. They look at the building and think they own it. They forget that the land underneath is rented. Now, let's look at Clause 14.2. This is our lever. I leaned forward. I had read the lease years ago, but I wanted to hear Walter's professional analysis. Clause 14.2 of the lease agreement, Walter read, states that the lessee, which is Vanguard Logistics Group, must maintain active, continuous compliance with all federal, state, and local safety and environmental regulations, including but not limited to OSHA and EPA standards. Furthermore, the lease explicitly specifies that the facility must operate under the direct oversight of a licensed hazardous materials administrator whose active certification must be registered with the Georgia Environmental Protection Division. Walter looked up at me. Your personal certification, license number EPA HMA 49826, is listed in Appendix C of this lease. You were hired to fulfill this specific operational requirement. Now that Bradley has terminated your employment for cause, what happens to that compliance status? The EPA permit is tied directly to my personal license, I explained. The moment I am off the payroll, Vanguard's active permit to store and stage Class 9 hazardous materials, which includes lithium-ion batteries, is automatically suspended. They cannot legally hold those 300 pallets of batteries without a certified administrator on site. By law, they have 48 hours to report the loss of their administrator to the EPA, and all hazmat operations must cease immediately until a new certified administrator is registered. Exactly, Walter said, tapping the document. But it gets better. Bradley didn't just fire you. He did it while actively committing major safety violations on the property. You have the photos? I pulled out my phone and plugged it into Walter's presentation screen. The display showed the clear, high-resolution photos I had taken over the last 2 days. One image showed the structural steel beams in Zone C, sagging under the 14,000-pound cast transmission pallets. The digital caliper reading of the deflection was visible in the frame. The next photos showed the battery pallets stacked 3 high, completely sealing off the double-door emergency exits in Zone B, with the exit signs clearly visible above the crates. This is open and shut, Walter said, his eyes gleaming. Under Clause 14.2, any material violation of federal safety standards that poses an immediate threat to life or property, or the failure to maintain the required environmental certifications, constitutes a default of the lease. Because they terminated the certified administrator and blocked the egress paths with hazardous cargo, they are in double default. What is the cure period? I asked. Normally, for minor lease disputes, there is a 30-day cure period, Walter said. But your father insisted on a special carve-out for severe safety and environmental hazards. For violations involving active hazard risks or the loss of municipal federal operating permits, the lease allows the lessor to issue an immediate 72-hour notice to cure. If the default is not cured, meaning they either cannot clear the hazard or they do not have a licensed administrator registered with the state, the lease terminates automatically. And if the lease terminates, I asked. Walter smiled, a cold, clinical expression. If the lease is terminated due to default, Vanguard must immediately vacate the premises. Any equipment or structures that are permanently attached to the real estate, what the law defines as fixax, become the property of the land trust. Under Georgia property law, once a lease is terminated for cause, the tenant forfeits their right to remove fixtures. Does that include the new racking system? It does, Walter said. The $15 million automated high-density racking system they installed last year is bolted directly into the concrete foundation. It is legally a fixture. If they default and we evict them, that entire automated system, along with the conveyor lines and sorting docks, belongs to the Ward Family Trust. They cannot touch it. I took a deep breath. This was the ultimate kill switch. Bradley Cross wanted to save a few $1,000s in shipping delays and secure his $250,000 bonus by cutting corners. Instead, his arrogance was about to cost his company their entire regional infrastructure. Let's Write the letters, I said. We spent the next 3 hours drafting the documents. Walter drafted the formal lease default and eviction notice. It was addressed to Vanguard Logistics Group's general counsel in Chicago, with a copy designated for immediate hand delivery to Bradley Cross at the Savannah facility. The letter detailed the specific violations of Clause 14.2, citing the termination of my EPA certification and the active OSHA violations. It gave them exactly 72 hours from the time of delivery to cure the defaults or vacate the land. At the same time, I logged into the federal OSHA whistleblower portal and the EPA environmental reporting system. I uploaded the time-stamped, geotagged photos of the sagging racks in Zone C and the blocked fire exits in Zone B. I filed a formal report stating that the facility was operating without a certified hazardous materials administrator in direct violation of their federal storage permits. By 2 p.m., the OSHA and EPA filings were submitted, and a certified courier was dispatched to deliver the lease default notice directly to Bradley Cross's office. As I watched Walter seal the envelope, I knew the clock had started ticking. Bradley Cross had 72 hours to realize that the ground he was standing on did not belong to him. The couriers delivered the lease default notice to the Savannah Distribution Center at 3:15 p.m. on Wednesday. According to Dale Higgins, who texted me later that evening, Bradley Cross had laughed when he signed for the letter. He had thrown it onto his desk, calling it a desperate bluff from a bitter, fired employee. He didn't even call corporate legal. He was too focused on the shipping numbers. By Thursday morning, however, the laughter had stopped. At 8:30 a.m., 3 vehicles marked with the Federal Department of Labor seal pulled into the Vanguard parking lot. Lead OSHA Inspector Clara Holloway and 2 inspectors walked past security and straight onto the warehouse floor. They didn't ask for permission. They had an administrative warrant issued on the basis of a high-probability emergency whistleblower report. Inspector Holloway went straight to Zone B. She found the double-door fire exit still blocked by the second tier of lithium-ion battery pallets. She immediately took photographs, logged the violation, and issued an oral stop-work directive. Then she walked over to Zone C. She inspected the structural support columns of the high-density racking system. When she saw the shearing support pins and the severe deflection under the 14,000-pound transmission castings, she didn't hesitate. Under OSHA procedures for imminent danger, Inspector Holloway issued an immediate citation and notification of penalty, along with a temporary restraining order shutting down all automated conveyor lines in Zone C and Zone B. At the exact same time, a notification from the Georgia Environmental Protection Division popped up on Vanguard's regional terminal. The state EPD, alerted by the EPA, officially suspended Vanguard's Class 9 hazardous materials storage permit because they had no registered, licensed hazardous materials administrator on the payroll. They were no longer legally allowed to store the lithium-ion batteries. The local port authority was immediately notified of the suspension. At the port of Savannah, 6 incoming container ships carrying Vanguard cargo were halted. The shipping lines refused to discharge the containers onto Vanguard's chassis because the receiving warehouse was operating without a valid hazmat storage license. Within hours, the logistics network began to choke. Freight trucks arriving from all over the southeast were turned away at the warehouse gates. The gravel parking lot filled up, and soon the line of idling semi-trucks backed up onto the highway access road, causing a 3-mile traffic jam on Interstate 95. The local police department dispatched patrol cars to manage the chaos. Vanguard was losing $50,000 an hour in delayed logistics operations and carrier detention fees. By noon, the news reached Vanguard's corporate headquarters in Chicago. The general counsel and the chief operating officer, Gordon Vance, had received our formal lease default and eviction notice. Unlike Bradley, the corporate legal team knew exactly what Clause 14.2 meant. They realized that in less than 48 hours, they would lose the land beneath their $45 million Savannah hub. Even worse, they would forfeit the $15 million automated racking system. My phone rang at 1:30 p.m. The caller ID showed Bradley Cross's name. I let it ring. It rang again 3 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. By 2 p.m., I had 7 missed calls from Bradley and 3 from the HR coordinator, Chelsea Finch. Finally, a text message came through from Bradley. "Victor, we need to talk. Call me immediately." "This is an operational emergency," I didn't reply. I was sitting on my back porch, enjoying a cup of coffee, watching the birds. At 3 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number with a Chicago area code. I answered. "Victor Ward?" a deep, exhausted voice asked. "This is Victor," I said. "Victor, this is Gordon Vance, Chief Operating Officer of Vanguard Logistics. I have our General Counsel on the line with me. We've received the notice from your attorney, Walter Kelly." "Good afternoon, Mr. Vance," I said. "I assume you've also heard from OSHA and the Georgia EPD." I heard a heavy sigh on the line. "We have. The Savannah facility is currently paralyzed. We have trucks backed up to the interstate, the port has frozen our cargo, and the local authorities are threatening to fine us for highway obstruction. Bradley Cross claims this is an administrative safety misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding, Mr. Vance," I said. "Bradley Cross ordered his supervisors to stack $12 million worth of lithium-ion batteries in front of the emergency fire exits to clear a shipping backlog. He also ordered the new racking system to be overloaded by 40%, causing structural sagging. When I refused to sign off on the safety compliance logs because of these violations, he terminated my employment for cause on the warehouse floor." "He did what?" Gordon Vance's voice went cold. "He fired the registered safety administrator while the facility was in active violation of OSHA standards?" "Yes," I said. "He called me an old dinosaur and told me I was easily replaced. But as you know, under Clause 14.2 of our land lease, the moment Vanguard no longer has an active, certified administrator, on site the lease goes into immediate material default, and, because of the imminent danger violations, we have issued a 72-hour notice to cure." "Victor," Vance said, his voice pleading now, "we cannot vacate that facility in 48 hours. It would destroy our entire southeastern supply chain. It would cost Vanguard tens of millions of dollars in client penalties. Surely, we can resolve this." "We can, Mr. Vance," I said calmly. "But I will not negotiate over the phone. If you want to discuss the lease, you and your representatives can meet me and my attorney tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at Walter Kelly's office in Savannah." "We will be there," Vance said immediately. "I am boarding our corporate jet in 30 minutes. Please, Victor, just tell your attorney not to file the eviction petition in court until we meet." "I will see you tomorrow, Mr. Vance," I said, and hung up the phone. I called Walter and told him about the conversation. He laughed. "They are terrified, Victor. They know they are holding a losing hand. I'll prepare the settlement draft." I went to bed early that night. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't have to wake up at 5 a.m. to check the morning freight schedules. I slept like a baby, knowing that the corporate ladder Bradley Cross had climbed was about to collapse beneath him. At 10 a.m. on Friday, Walter Kelly's conference room was tense enough to crack glass. I sat on one side of the table with Walter. Across from us sat Gordon Vance, the COO of Vanguard Logistics, looking exhausted after a red-eye flight from Chicago, flanked by a senior corporate attorney. Next to them sat Bradley Cross. The change in Bradley was dramatic. His slick-back hair was messy, his tie was slightly askew, and he spent the entire time staring at his own hands, his face pale and sweating. Gordon Vance opened the folder in front of him. "Thank you for meeting us, Victor. I have spent the last 12 hours reviewing the situation. I will be blunt. The Savannah facility is in a state of complete paralysis. We have over 80 carriers threatening to sue us for logistics delays, and the Port Authority has officially blocked our container clearance. We need to resolve this default today." Walter Kelly leaned forward, his hands folded on the lease document. "Mr. Vance, the path to resolution is very simple, but it is non-negotiable. Your regional director, Mr. Cross here, committed a series of gross safety violations that violated federal law and placed the facility in breach of Clause 14.2 of our land lease. The 72-hour notice to cure expires tomorrow afternoon. If the defaults are not cured by then, we will file the eviction petition in Chatham County Court. At that point, the lease terminates, Vanguard will be forced to vacate, and the $15 million automated racking system will become the property of the Ward Family Trust." Vanguard's corporate attorney cleared his throat. "Mr. Kelly, the racking system was installed at our expense. Forfeiture of that asset would be highly punitive. It is standard property law, counsel, Walter replied calmly. Your client bolted that equipment into the concrete slab of our land. When you default on a land lease, the fixtures stay. If you want to keep operating that equipment and that facility, you will agree to our terms. What are the terms? Gordon Vance asked, looking directly at me. I stood up and placed a single sheet of paper on the table. Here are the requirements for the Ward Family Trust to withdraw the lease default notice and sign the 10-year lease renewal. First, Bradley Cross is to be terminated for cause immediately. He will receive no severance, no bonus, and Vanguard will cooperate fully with the federal OSHA investigation regarding his orders to block the emergency fire exits. Bradley looked up, his eyes wide. Gordon, you can't do this. I was just trying to hit the throughput targets. I did it for the company. Shut up, Bradley. Gordon Vance snapped, his voice sharp as a razor. He didn't even look at him. You lied to corporate about the safety logs. You fired our key compliance officer. And you put a $45 million operation in jeopardy to chase a personal bonus. You are done, I continued. Second, I will not return as an employee of Vanguard. Instead, Vanguard will sign a 5-year independent compliance consultant contract with my private LLC, Ward Safety Consulting. The contract will pay a flat retainer of $180,000 per year. As the principal consultant, I will hold absolute veto authority over all warehousing and storage operations at the Savannah facility. If I detect a safety hazard, I have the unilateral right to stop operations, and no regional manager can override it. Vanguard's attorney frowned. That is a very high level of operational authority for an outside contractor. It is the only way this facility operates safely, I said. If you don't like it, you can find another 300,000 square foot warehouse in Savannah, dismantle your conveyor systems, and move your operations by tomorrow afternoon. The attorney looked at Gordon Vance. Vance just nodded for me to continue. Third, I said, the land lease renewal will be signed today, but the monthly rent will increase by 50%, from $30,000 to $45,000 per month. That represents an additional $180,000 per year paid to the Ward Family Trust. Fourth, Vanguard will pay a one-time settlement of $250,000 to settle all claims regarding wrongful termination, retaliation, and emotional distress. This payment must clear by wire transfer by 4 p.m. today. When I finished speaking, the room was silent. Bradley Cross looked like he was about to vomit. The corporate attorney did some quick calculations on a legal pad and leaned over to whisper in Gordon Vance's ear. I knew what he was saying. They were facing a $50 million catastrophe if the Savannah hub went dark. The cost of our terms was a drop in the bucket compared to the alternative. Gordon Vance looked at the attorney, who gave a slow, reluctant nod. Vance looked back at me. We accept the terms, Victor. The attorney has the authority to draft the settlement agreement and the lease amendment immediately. The wire transfer will be initiated within the hour. He then turned to Bradley Cross. Bradley, leave your company laptop and security key card on this table. You are terminated, effective immediately. Building security will escort you to your vehicle. If you contact any Vanguard employees or attempt to enter the warehouse property, we will file trespassing charges. Bradley sat frozen for a moment. Then, with trembling hands, he pulled his laptop and key card from his bag, placed them on the table, and stood up. He walked out of the conference room without saying a word. We spent the next 2 hours signing the paperwork. By 3:30 p.m., Walter confirmed that the $250,000 wire transfer had cleared in the trust account. The lease amendment was signed, securing the $45,000 monthly payments for the next 10 years. The consultant contract was executed, making me the ultimate authority on safety at the Savannah hub. On Monday morning, I walked back into the Savannah Distribution Center. I wasn't wearing an employee badge anymore. I wore a contractor's lanyard. Dale Higgins met me at the entrance. Welcome back, Victor. The place has been a mess. Let's get it cleaned up, Dale, I said, before we allowed a single freight truck to unload. I had the warehouse crew use the forklifts to remove the 14,000-pound transmission castings from Zone C, relocating them to the heavy-duty ground slots. Then, We moved the lithium-ion battery pallets out of the Zone B fire exit lanes and into the certified chemical containment bays. Clara Holloway from OSHA returned for a follow-up inspection. I walked the floor with her, showing her the cleared exits and the structural support pin replacements we had completed over the weekend. She nodded in approval, officially lifting the stop work order. I stood on the elevated observation deck, looking down at the warehouse floor. The conveyors were running smoothly, the green lights on the sorting lines were blinking, and the forklifts were moving cargo in neat, orderly paths. The trucks were rolling through the gates again, and the regional supply chain was back in motion. I was no longer just an older employee waiting for retirement. I was the landlord, the safety director, and the man who had reclaimed the ground beneath his own feet. As I watched the forklift operators work in a safe, clear environment, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Bradley Cross had tried to optimize me out of a job. Instead, he had optimized himself right out of the industry.